I call this recipe really good meatloaf. We've done it at cooking school, called the world's best meatloaf, spicy meatloaf. I don't care what you call it, this is going to be a winner at your house. And I know Justin's going to love it because it's got a little bit of a kick to it. You're going to start off with like a lot of meatloaf, about 1.5 pounds of ground chuck. Could you use ground turkey? You could. And then I would just up the spices a bit. You could even use 1 pound of ground chuck and 1/2 pound of pork sausage if you like. But for this recipe, I'm using ground chuck. And if you look, I don't like to use a very lean, real lean meat when I make meatloaf. It turns out too tough. So use the kind of ground beef that you would use for hamburger. This is 80% lean, 20% fat. Ground chuck is great. I've used ground sirloin too as well. So 1.5 pounds. And just set that aside because what you're going to do next is you're going to film a pan with olive oil. And when I say film a pan, just a little bit here. And what I'm going to do now is add a generous cup of chopped onion. And you don't have to be too fussy about it as far as how you chop it. And a generous a couple cloves of garlic, and I think it's a generous teaspoon. So what we're going to do, and this is a good trick too when you're thinking of different things like meatloaves, if you saute the onions ahead of time a little bit, really rounds out the flavor. And by doing that with the garlic, you got a good basic combination. Now I don't want this to burn because you know garlic and onions have a lot of natural sugar. I just want to cook that till the onions are soft. And you'll start smelling that wonderful aroma. And by the way, you want to have your oven preheated to 400. So we've got the onion and the garlic going. So what else goes in here? Here is the secret. Justin, you're going to love this. This is called Meatloaf. It's called sweet chili sauce, but let me tell you, it's got sugar, vinegar, hot peppers. It's got a touch of sweetness, but it's very hot. So delicious. It's great on potato salad, you name it. I mean, I could be addicted. I could just eat it out of the bottle. But that's what it is. And most groceries carry it now too. So you're going to start off with 1/4 cup of that and 1/4 cup of ketchup. You want to mix those two together. You're going to wind up with about 1/2 cup. And so what you're going to do, half of this goes in the mixture and the other half goes on top of the meatloaf. So in a bowl, what we're going to do, we're going to put 2 large eggs, and these are from my girls. When I say my girls, my chickens. We have 1 white hen, and of course she lays white eggs, and all the rest, the brown hens, lay brown eggs. So she's just starting to lay, so these are really good, wonderful eggs. You want to start off with 2 eggs, 2 large eggs, and just beat them up a little bit. And then we're going to add 1/4 cup of milk. And let's see, I know I had it here. Here it is. It can be any kind of milk, evaporated, 2%, whatever you have on hand to that. I always call this reality cooking because it's me and Justin in the kitchen. No staff. But I do have the best producer / media production specialist in the business. So you want to add that. So we've got the 2 eggs and 1/4 cup of milk. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add some parsley. A palmful of fresh chopped. Now what happens if you don't have it? It's okay, you can leave it out. But remember, parsley is like a vitamin pill in a plant. And dry parsley works okay. Couple teaspoons if you want. But this lends a little bit of color and a bit of flavor. And let's see how this is starting to look. Starting to cook. Starting to cook up nicely. So we've got that. And then we're going to add about 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. And it's funny because people who say they don't like anchovies may love Worcestershire sauce. But you know what? This has anchovies in it. About 1 tablespoon. We're just going to sort of eyeball it. There we go. Maybe a little more. So we've got the Worcestershire sauce in there. And I'm going to just put this back over here, give myself a little more room. And we're going to add 1 teaspoon of dry oregano. And as Justin knows, this is a pretty, it's like used in a lot of different cuisines, but especially Mexican and Italian. And, oh, this smells so good. Oregano is probably the most healing herb on the planet. When you use dry herbs, do what my mom taught me, rub them between your palms, and that starts releasing the oil. Really good, about a teaspoon. Salt and pepper to taste. So we're just going to add a few grindings of fresh sea salt. When I say fresh, it's probably actually millions of years old. And don't be afraid of salt, as I mentioned before. It's a seasoning. Some freshly ground pepper. This is looking good. I'm going to actually turn this off because the residual heat in the skillet will continue to cook this. And some fresh breadcrumbs, about a cup or so. And I just put these in the food processor. You can use whole wheat, you can use whatever you want. And we're going to just mix all this up along with about half of that sauce. And that's going to be about a fourth of a cup because it made about a half a cup. And we're just going to beat this up. Sometimes this is called a panade in cooking school. I just call it meatloaf mixture. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my meat, my 1.5 pounds of ground beef, and put it in there. Now, here's a tip. When you mix hamburgers, and I'm also going to add the onions and garlic. I'm going to let that cool a little bit. Whenever you work with ground meat trying to form patties of any sort or meatloaf, use a light hand because the more you work with it, the denser it gets, and it can be tough. But you want this to have a nice, not a loose texture, but not a real tight texture. Make sure I've got everything in here. We're going to put in the garlic and onion. Smells good. Really good. I should call this Justin's meatloaf. Oh, I have to tell you too, the topping, let me get this over here in there. The topping that we're using is the My Ploy, the sweet chili sauce and ketchup. But if you like a traditional topping, you know, the ketchup, but with a bit of a kick, on our website, I'm going to put my chipotle pepper topping. Chipotle peppers are dried jalapenos. They're smoked, and these are in an adobo sauce, really spicy but so delicious. And we just use regular ketchup with it, a little bit of cloves, brown sugar, a little bit of allspice. So we'll share that recipe too. That's a more sweet topping. So here we go. I'm going to start off with a fork and then probably use my hands for the rest of it. And the pan that you're going to use, you want to spray it or line it with foil. Again, use a light hand here. You can use gloves if you want. I'm not going to do that. Just going to mix this up. You're going to see it's a rather loose mixture. Let me finish this up here. All right, here we go. Just going to go ahead and mix this. And we're going to roast this until the internal temperature reaches about 160, 155 to 160. That's a real safe temperature. And what's going to happen after it comes out of the oven, we're going to let it sit a few minutes. That temperature is going to raise even more. And you'll know when you cut into it, the juices will run clear. There'll be no more pink in the meat. We're going to just put this in here and put this over here in the sink. And when I cook, I usually have a sink full of hot, soapy water. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to form this with my hands. But see how loose it is? That's what you want. I'll have to wipe off the edges here a little bit. And Mom always did a football, and I like to do a football too. So, but whatever shape. And by the way, you can make individual meatloaves out of these too and lay them on a cookie sheet or put them in muffin tins. You could do lots of that. And on our website, I'll give you the proportions of baking time for that. The temperature will stay the same. There we go. Now, anytime I get my hands in something, bless, whether it's dough, the meat, or whatever. Now, this is going to take About 45 minutes to an hour. And 15 minutes before it's done, I am going to baste it with the rest of the sauce. So stay tuned. I'm just going to pop this in the oven, and then we're going to enjoy it in not too long of a time. Well, our meatloaf's been in about 45 minutes, and probably take another 10 to 15 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and baste the top and sides with that wonderful barbecue, spicy barbecue sauce that we made up. And it's going to give it a nice glaze and color. It's so good. You know, sometimes I'll make extra of this up just to pass around, because Justin probably would like a little more. And when you baste the sides a little bit, usually the basting liquid will run down the sides. Okay, that's all there is to it. I'm going to put this back in the oven till it reaches an internal temperature of 160, and we're going to check it with the meat thermometer to make sure. So stay tuned. Well, it's been about an hour. I glazed the meatloaf about 15 minutes ago, and it has come up to temp. Actually, you want to go about 160. This has gone a little before. And when you do take a temperature of meat, if it's not dense like this, sometimes you have to go into the side, like if it's a chop or a thinner piece of meat. But go in the center. Whoops, there's my timer. And that is really the coolest part of the meat. So if it reads properly, you know the ends will as well. And make sure when you poke it, don't do that, because the bottom of the pan is going to be much hotter. It's going to give you a false reading. So I usually let this sit for a few minutes, just to let all the juices settle. By the way, this makes great sandwiches the next day. So what we're going to do is we're just going to actually let it sit for a few minutes. I'm going to take it out and put it on the cutting board, so stay tuned. Okay, really good meatloaf is what I call this. It's done. And what I did was I just cut it in half in the baking dish, and I'm going to slide it out. You might want to drain some of those juices. Oh, this smells so good. I think Justin's going to love this. And I'm going to slice it. We're going to serve it with the side of mashed potatoes. Maybe some fresh green beans. Wouldn't that be good? Again, leftovers make great sandwiches. This was one of my favorite sandwiches. It's funny because my mom used to throw everything but the kitchen sink in her meatloaf. Leftover peas, veggies, they went in. So I'm going to give Justin a couple nice hefty slices here. Again, if you really love that sauce, the glaze, feel free to make extra and pass around. And also, those of you who have seen me put my bowls and such on the stove, it's cool. Be careful. I would never do that, because sometimes they have the pilot's lights lit and such. So that's something I do, but it's not something I would recommend that you do. Okay, let's scoop this out. And I told Justin I love this plate. Look at that. Just like a 1950s diner. So what we're going to do, oh, I know what I want to do first. Let's get the mashed potatoes out. And so, meatloaf and mashed potatoes. What could be better? I was laughing. I said, geez, I have got to get you guys a smaller spoon. This is ginormous. And Justin said, hey, you know, firemen usually eat here. So this is their best utensil. A little fresh chopped parsley. We're going to put the meat on top. Whoops. Okay, that's all right. I hope Justin doesn't mind. I don't think he will. Here we go. And you have a little extra of that sauce to drizzle. That would be just delicious. So, gilding the lily here. This is our wonderful world's best meatloaf, really good meatloaf, whatever you want to call it, nice and juicy, perfect comfort food.